They talk about 30, 35, $36 trillion debt, but then they don't talk about the pensions and other things that are already promised, but they don't have money for. And that, it works into the 90s.
That's Owen Williams. He's a retired exterminator and the quintessential dad, right down to the Dodge minivan and the Colonial Williamsburg t-shirt. Every day for the last 40 years, he's had a bowl of peanut butter and cornflakes for breakfast. But underneath the affable exterior, Owen worries about where we're headed as a nation. He feels we've strayed from the vision of the founders, and he's concerned about ballooning national debt. This week, we're talking about property taxes, fact-checking your way through fake news, and French prostitutes on strike here on What is America? Florida, that paradoxical peninsula pushing its way into the Caribbean, where nature refuses to be tamed, where scrub palmettos break through concrete sidewalks. This is a true story. The day I moved into my rental unit here in Gainesville, there was a commotion in the courtyard. 3 cop cars had their lights flashing, and a small crowd had gathered. Uh-oh, I thought. Turns out, an alligator had wandered out of the swamp and into the first-floor hallway of my new apartment building. But, the animal control officer assured me, it was only 6 feet long, so nothing to worry about. Hi, I'm John, and this is What is America? For the next year, I'm going to drive all over the country and talk to people about their lives. Together, we're going to figure out the new story of America. Who we are, what our values are, and where we're going as a nation. I'm here for the next month in Gainesville, and then I'm off to Allentown, Pennsylvania. To find out more about our itinerary and stay connected, visit our website, whatisamericapodcast.com. Before we get going, I just want to pull up that photo one more time. Friends, I've got a question for you. Am I turning into Florida man? All the pieces are there. Tivas, tank top, cop car, live alligator. I've only been in Florida for a week, but it happens faster than you might think. I also want to say thank you to everyone who emailed after last week's question. To recap, the haircut situation was getting out of control, and I asked if any of you knew a great place to get a sick fade here in Gainesville. Your answer was unequivocal. Go see Fila Perez at Gainesville's exclusive barbershop. And I'm not going to lie, you crushed it. Fila is an amazing barber, and he's also a ton of fun to spend time with. Check out his Instagram, @FilaFades. Okay, let's talk about the interview. Owen Williams is a retired exterminator. He's 68 years old, and he could not be more of a dad if he wanted to be. He and his wife Lynne and their 3 kids grew up on a quiet street here in Gainesville. The story of how they got here is an interesting one. Back in 1991, Owen and Lynne moved here to help take care of an aging parent. Owen's company said he'd have a job when he arrived, but then the job ended up falling through. In Owen's telling, the company had government-mandated racial quotas, and they ended up hiring a less qualified Hispanic candidate. The next 5 years were hard. Owen worked first 2, then 3 jobs to make ends meet. He delivered packages, delivered pizzas, and worked as a landscaper, which is no mean feat when you consider that summer temperatures routinely get up into the mid-90s. During that time, Owen was sleeping just 4 to 5 hours a night. He got to spend time with his family just once or twice a week. When we talk about politics, we tend to use the word should. Like, we should level the playing field. We should work to correct historical inequalities. But we don't do as good a job thinking about where the rubber meets the road. And in this case, the rubber met the road in the life of Owen Williams. When Owen lost his job, was anyone thinking about what was next for him? On a very practical level, are you surprised that he developed a deep distrust of government? I do want to add a disclaimer, which is that I'm working on this podcast basically solo, and I don't actually have the resources to fact-check Owen's story. The reasons he lost his job could be more complicated. It all happened 30 years ago, and tracking down the details would take weeks, if not months. It may actually be impossible at this point. But in the end, I don't have any reason to doubt what Owen told me. And actually, I think the story and the lessons he draws from it are interesting regardless. This week's interview was a big one for me. It ended up challenging beliefs I've held basically since college. I hope you enjoy it.
I'm Owen Williams, married, father of 3, live in Gainesville, Florida. Been here 31 years, grew up in the city of Detroit. That's where I was raised and still kind of call home. My brother lives up there. My mother, still alive, living in Williston, about 30 minutes away from here. And looking forward to doing What's America Mean to Me interview podcast.
Well, thank you for doing it. What was it like growing up in Detroit?
It's a lot different now than it was back then. Basically, we were told, come in when the street lights come on. You get home from school. We were out riding bikes, playing hide and seek, baseball, softball is what we used to play. But we did a lot of that. A lot of softball, football in the street, touch. We tried tackle a couple of times, but
sounds like fun.
That's a little rough on the concrete.
Yeah.
But we had our buddies all up and down the block, and we used to climb trees and God knows what. We'd end up on our bikes 5-6 miles from the house. Parents didn't know where we were, and
it's weird. America,
not now.
The country's a lot safer now than it used to be back then, just in terms of crime statistics.
Yeah.
And yet kids on average are allowed to roam a lot less far, and they have to come in earlier.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I think that the kids need to get away from the phone and the gaming systems and get out and get some fresh air and exercise.
Yep.
I see a lot of overweight issues, and I think that's part of it, is people just not getting the
Screens.
exercise that they need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me about your education.
Went to Farmington High School, graduated from there, went to Michigan Tech, which is in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Let me tell you, it snows a lot. We had 395 inches of snow one year.
Holy
it
wow.
snowed every day, at least a little bit, for 180 days.
That's more than an inch
And they did not call school.
per day.
They didn't call school once.
Wow.
Because they got some snow removal equipment.
I'm going up to Detroit as part of this trip. I might need to get your advice. But it's going to be summer. There's not going to be snow.
No. And got an associate in electrical engineering. Went to work for Underwriters Laboratories in Chicago. Did product safety testing for 10 years.
You told me you got to blow shit up.
I got, basically heavy-duty motor drives. And, the idea is what happens if somebody drops a wrench right across the terminals. So we take a copper bus bar and put it right across there and turn it on. And if it goes click and clears the circuit, that's good.
Good.
If it can't clear the circuit in a quarter of a cycle, then it blows up like a stick of dynamite.
Okay.
And that's bad.
How old are you?
I was out of college there, so let's see. I was 22 when I started.
Seems like
21,
a really
21.
fun job for a 21-year-old.
21-year-old. Yeah. And so I worked there from 81 until 1990. Then I moved down here to Florida, to Gainesville.
Okay.
I had to take care of my in-laws. My mother-in-law had passed away unexpectedly, and my father-in-law had health issues and needed some taken care of. And been here ever since.
Okay. What's your favorite food?
My favorite food? That probably pizza.
Pizza. What kind of pizza?
I prefer the Pizza Hut deep dish pan pizza.
Oh, sounds great. Yeah. Toppings?
Anything.
Wow.
Including anchovies.
Are there any toppings that are just off limits for you?
No.
No? Pineapple?
Pineapple is awesome.
Chicken?
Chicken is good.
Potatoes?
I haven't had potatoes.
I even saw somebody put noodles on a pizza, and I was like, this is a crime.
Yeah.
But you would be okay with that?
I'd give it a go.
Okay.
I'm adventurous.
All right. What do you eat for breakfast?
Cornflakes and with peanut butter in it.
Wow.
Is my favorite.
Milk or just peanut butter?
With milk.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Milk.
And how long have you been having that breakfast for?
I don't know. My dad turned it on to me, and he passed away in 83. So, I don't know. I was probably 15 or so.
So you've been having...
He used to invent interesting things like peanut butter and onion sandwich. That's really good, believe it or not.
Is that where you get your creativity from?
Some of it, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So you have been having peanut butter and cornflakes for longer than I've been alive.
Yeah.
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 How old are you?
66.
You look good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's see. What kind of car do you drive?
Right now I have a Dodge Caravan that's been converted to a handicap accessible vehicle because my wife is in a wheelchair because of her hip. Mm-hmm. She's trying to get her act together to where her biometrics are where they'll do the surgery.
Uh-huh.
So, but she's been
What surgery?
Hip replacement.
Hip replacement. Okay.
Yeah. But she's been in a wheelchair for about 6 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're hoping within the next year or so to go ahead and get a hip replacement. Hopefully she'll be up and walking around again.
I hope
which
so, too.
will be
That's
great.
another one of those knock on wood situations. So you are a world traveler, too.
Yes.
You, I think I remember this, have been to Europe and on several Caribbean cruises.
Yes.
So when you went to these other countries, what'd you think?
We were going to go to Spain because I was taking Spanish in high school.
Okay.
And they were having some political turbulence over there. So we went to Italy. And Italy had their national elections the first night we were there.
Okay.
And the Communist Party lost by 1% of the vote. It was a lot closer than what they thought.
Whoa.
I mean, it was really
Okay.
nip and tuck. And so the first full day, we went to Venice. And they take a siesta like they do in Mexico.
Okay.
And in the afternoon there, we got into the back streets and we came across a courtyard where they had a giant communist rally.
Oh.
And here were the big posters of Lenin and the hammer and sickle and and you're an American and it's like, wow, this is reality. This is and that was back in the Cold War. It was on type of thing, the arms race and everything.
And how did you feel? In that courtyard?
A bunch of different feelings. It was just like, I don't know, just awestruck.
Awestruck?
Yeah.
In what way?
It's just like, wow, this is happening. This is here.
Like Europe doesn't just exist for us to vacation in. It's
right.
The real deal.
Yeah.
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 What was your impression of Europe when you went back?
Well, the first time I went, the hookers were on strike in Paris during Bastille Day.
Shucks.
They weren't the second time.
Okay.
But we take a lot of stuff for granted here. Like fuel is way cheaper here than it is in Europe. Mm-hmm. Highway systems here are just way superior to what they have over there. We flew into Gatwick Airport, and we took the train to Victoria Station, and then our last hotel was right by Victoria Station. So we thought, we'll take the train, we'll get the car, and then we'll go up to Scotland. Wow, what an adventure. One, you're on the wrong side of the road. Two, you're on the wrong side of the car. Three, you got the wife in the back seat's got the blinders on because she's freaking out.
Hey, me again. This week, something awesome happened. For the first time, I got a comment on one of my videos from somebody I didn't already know.
That's right. As near as I can tell, Matthew R. is a stranger who just found us on the internet. First of all, Matthew, if you're out there, who are you? How'd you find us? Inquiring minds want to know. Second, in case it's not abundantly clear, this podcast is just getting off the ground. Right now, it's mostly friends and family. So if you could take a minute to pound that like button, subscribe to my channel, and leave a comment, gosh, that would make my day. You could even send it to that one friend where you've been meaning to text them, but it's been a minute and you don't really know what to say. Just a thought. Okay, back to the interview. Okay, what is something that you're proud of accomplishing?
Raising my 3 children, for sure. 2 of them are mine. My son Michael and my daughter Stephanie. My son Jordan is adopted, and he was my nephew. And his mother passed away unexpectedly, and the father was never in the picture. And so we ended up adopting him when he was 12. And I thought I was past chaperoning dances and going to PTA meetings and that whole thing there.
They'll get you.
Yeah,
pull you right back in.
They pulled me right back into that with him. But he's 24 now. And my son is 34 and my daughter's 39. So,
finally got that empty nest.
Yeah. Well, he's Jordan's leaving in August. He's got a couple of buddies and they're saving up to get into an apartment.
Awesome.
So once he gets out, and then Michael is back home temporarily. Sooner or later he'll get it together and get back out as well.
Okay. Well, you brought up the kids. So tell me, what did you learn from your parents, and what are the values that you tried to teach your kids?
What I learned from my parents was values. That was, you work hard. You say please and thank you. Yes or no, sir. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. That type of thing. Always be kind. If you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything.
Why'd you come to Gainesville?
Because my mother-in-law had passed away, and my father-in-law needed taken care of. I had made an arrangement with my company that I was working on Underwriters Laboratories. I had been there 9 years, and I was going to go from an office staff person to a field staff person, and do inspections in the field, and everything was set up. Once I moved, it was the era of, hey, you got to have quotas. You got to have X amount of women. You've got to have X amount of, blacks and Latinos and minorities in your employ. And I was out of a job.
You mentioned that to me yesterday, and you said they wanted to keep you. Your supervisor, the regional manager.
The regional manager, the guy that was in charge of the office that I was at, was very excited because I had some particular skills with, they're called motor control centers, or industrial control equipment. It's basically a bunch of different electrical equipment. They're one-of-a-kind pieces. You got high voltage, low voltage, all kinds of stuff in there. And everything has to have the right spacings. Metal thicknesses count. You got to be able to use, different tools and whatnot. And I knew my way around that real well.
Yeah.
And, anyways, they really wanted me, but the decision from HR was, hey, we need to comply.
How did that feel?
I didn't like it.
I can imagine.
I didn't like it.
Like when you found out and you had to go home and tell Lynne, what was that conversation?
It was, hey, we're landing on my feet. I've always landed on my feet.
So what did that look like to land on your feet?
Well, fortunately, I was living with my father-in-law at the time. He had a house. We were taking care of him, so I didn't have a house payment. I did have a 401k that I could draw on, for a little bit. Ended up working for Airborne Express, delivering packages, and loved that. But the pay wasn't that great, so then I ended up having to take a second job, delivering pizzas for Pizza Hut. And then eventually got talked into management at Pizza Hut. Ended up being a general manager there for a while. And then my father-in-law passed away. It left us a little bit of money, not an extraordinary amount, but that's when my wife said, "Hey, you've been working 2 jobs for like 8 years." And at one point I was working 3.
What was the third?
The third was a landscaping.
Okay.
My wife was very active in Girl Scouts, and her assistant leader's brother had a bunch of people quit.
Okay.
And he needed some help. And it was coming up on Christmas, and I was like, yeah, I could do it for a little extra Christmas money for the kids.
In the summer, it's a different story in Florida.
You know. So I did a year and a half of that.
All through the year?
Yeah.
August?
Yeah.
How was that?
Hot. But I was only working, like 7 a.m. to 1 o'clock.
Okay.
And then I had to go home, and I'd get 2 hours of sleep. And then I would go work the Pizza Hut night shift. I'd get home at 2 a.m. And I would get the kids up at 5. And that was my only time with my kids there for a little bit.
That math doesn't really work.
Yeah.
There's 2 hours of sleep in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And then maybe 2 hours at night.
At night, 2 to 3. Yeah, somewhere in there.
And that's all you were getting.
And that's all I was getting.
That's hard.
Yeah. And then I had 1 day a week off. And then, I got my family. I've got my mom. So, if I need to go down to my mom's, now it's like I don't have a day with my family for a couple of weeks. Sorry.
Shoot.
Getting over a cold.
Okay. So then you found your way to the exterminator business.
Yes.
Talk to me about that.
Well, it was time to go back to work, and I just filled out ad after ad after ad, job.
You told me it took them a month to get back to you.
Yes.
And you thought you didn't get it.
Right.
Because why?
Because they were doing a higher level background check, because we would get into houses with alarm codes and businesses and things like that during non-business hours. So they had to make sure that, you were reliable.
Yeah.
And it was kind of neat. My first day there, it was like, wow, everybody's like my age. I was, early 40s. And I was used to working with college kids at the Pizza Hut.
Yep.
So that was kind of fun.
You told me you wish you'd found that job earlier.
Yes. It was a great marriage of, I get to talk to people, have my regular customers and everything. So I have that personal interaction, and then a lot of learning. I love to learn. Wasn't stale or boring at any point in time. There was always something to learn.
And you were moving around a lot?
Moving around a lot. Oh, yeah.
The pay was good?
Pay was decent.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking about it. When you're an exterminator, you go into people's homes and you see a lot of their lives. And what did you learn about people from being an exterminator?
Well, I learned a lot about people actually at the end of high school and early college.
Okay.
I had a summer job, and I used to board up and clean out homes in the ghettos in Detroit. And so I learned a lot about how low people can go. And one of the things that I learned is that you can you can throw all the money you want at people to help them, but if they don't have hope, it ain't going nowhere. It ain't making a difference.
Wow.
You know, and it's like, why, if I'm getting unemployment and unlimited visits you get so many doctor's visits, but you can always go to the ER. So they have health insurance. They've got food stamps. They're getting welfare. Why should I go work a minimum wage job and not have the benefits?
So when you say if you don't have hope, what does hope look like in this situation?
You know, it like, you know, the purpose of the podcast, it's America, and to me, it's a land of opportunity. But, you know, a lot of people, you get knocked down so many times, and it's hard to get up. Mm-hmm. It's hard to get up, and you get up and you get lost. You know, you get into alcohol, you get into drugs, you know, different vices. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to get out of the hole. And
if somebody gets there,
I think it's easier for people to get out of that spot than what they think. They get convinced that this is my life and there's no changing it. And a lot of times it's just because they haven't seen they haven't seen the other side of life. Yeah. They've always had the hard life. They just haven't seen or haven't been taught what it takes to have a good life.
Have there been times in your life when you felt that hopelessness?
Yeah. I imagine there's, you know, you always kept, you know, those times it's like, you know, hey, the hot water heater went out and the car went out and I'm short a house payment and, you know, what's happening day to day here, mm-hmm. you know.
And in those moments, what did you do?
You know, got a second job.
Okay.
You know, made it work.
Yeah.
Made it work.
Yeah.
You know, had to, one time in North Carolina, we were kind of behind the eight ball and went to United Way and used their bill payment system. You know, They kind of consolidated all the bills and, you know, negotiated for me and really helped us out. You know, and sometimes people need a hand up.
Yep. When was a moment that somebody was kind to you?
When I was growing up, people were always kind. It was kind of different. You know, you knew everybody on the street by name. You know, if you needed a cup of sugar, you could go to the neighbors and get a cup of sugar. Type of thing.
Yeah.
It was just everybody helped everybody out.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of envy.
Yeah.
You know, I don't care. Bob down the street makes twice as much as me, you know.
Yeah.
Good for him.
Good for him.
You know, he doesn't owe me anything. Mm-hmm. That type of thing.
You said that it's different now. It's different now on your street.
Yeah. You know, I don't know anybody hardly that lives on my block. I've been there since 91. I've had a couple of neighbors move in and out, but, you know, I got Barb that lives across the street. That's about all I know on a first name basis.
What happened?
People became more introverted. You know, when I was in college, I used to walk a mile and a half to college. And every person that I saw, you know, usually out in the morning shoveling or snow, they would always say hi to you. You know, as you're walking by, you say hi. Yeah. You don't know them from Adam, and
sure,
but you say hi.
Yeah.
It was just a polite thing to do.
Yeah.
And people don't say that now.
What changed?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I just think people are more self-centered now.
That's something I'm hearing is there are these neighborhood connections and these community connections that used to be stronger.
Yeah.
And something about that fabric has frayed.
Yeah.
And I guess that's something I'm trying to figure out too, is why are those connections so strained now?
Yeah. And I don't know. I don't know.
Let's talk about the election.
Okay.
Who'd you vote for?
Trump.
All right.
Yep.
And what got you excited to cast that vote?
He is not a politician. He's a businessman.
Okay.
And if he says he's going to do something, he darn well tries to deliver on it. And politicians are really good at saying, I want to do this, I want to do that. But it seems like they never get things done.
I hear you. What policy issues were you fired up about?
This time around, the first time I voted for him in 2016. The only thing that I was really not pleased with in 2016 with him was that he was a spender, just like all politicians. And I worry about the debt in this country. I worry a lot. And then this go around, he was really talking about cutting the debt. And I was like, okay, because it's got to happen. You know, it's going to be, I don't know if you're familiar with MASH, the TV show.
I am not.
Oh, okay. There was an episode where, they had to turn their cash in and get new cash.
Okay.
Because there was so much counterfeit.
Oh.
So that the cash they had became worthless. Well, we were headed there. We were headed there in a heartbeat. I could see where they're going to say, they talk about devaluing the dollar, and I was like, yes, they talk about 30, 35, 36 trillion dollar debt, but then they don't talk about the pensions and other things that are already promised, but they don't have money for. And that it works into the 90s.
The interesting thing is that functionally in the U.S., many people in the middle and the bottom end up paying more than people at the top.
As a share of their income.
Yeah,
I would say yes.
I mean, Ronald Reagan said that the idea that a bus driver should pay percentage-wise more of his income than a businessman, a doctor or a lawyer, was odious.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I have mixed feelings on it. You'll always need the uber rich, especially the critical thinkers, kind of like Elon Musk. Your Rockefeller and all the robber barons. The drivers of the industry, the innovators, and they need an enormous amount of wealth to drive those things, and, Bill Gates, look what he did with computers and Steve Jobs and you got Amazon and, all these, and it takes an enormous amount of money. And if you tax these people to where they have no wealth, then you don't get the innovation. You stagnate. So it's a two-edged sword. But I think that...
Is there a limit?
I think that the system should be set up to where people in the lower incomes absolutely pay no taxes. But it's hard to figure that out. That's why I'm like, going with Trump on this tariff thing. It's like he's talking about getting rid of the IRS. And it's like, well, if he can do that, that'd be great.
Yeah.
That'd be great, And I know you're not from Florida, but Ron DeSantis and then Shapiro up in Pennsylvania, they're both working diligently about getting rid of property taxes. Just imagine that if you owned your property, without the government saying, no, you don't, and that's the way the founders wanted it, is that, you had your piece of property, your land, you were the king. You just had to follow the laws of the community, the state, the country. And I'm kind of excited about that.
Excited about the no property taxes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That'd be awesome.
My mind's going 12 different ways.
They're going to get their money one way or another.
That's what I was thinking.
They got to figure out how to replace it. But if they can do it, great.
So what about people who don't own property? If we got rid of the property taxes, probably the burden would fall on people who don't own.
Yes. And that is a downside there. And if there's something that I feel is wrong in America right now, you have the American dream, you own your own car, house and a car. And, when I was growing up, a single person, could in the family could be working and you could afford a house and you could afford a car and you could afford college and yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
And that ain't the way now.
Yeah.
And, my kids are, 30s and Steffi's 39. They're just looking to get into their first house. And that is an uphill battle. And that is hard for people now.
Yeah.
And you're from California. I don't know how people in California manage it. It's
tough.
Housing prices are crazy out there.
Nationwide, the median is in the 400,000s.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, more than 4 times the median annual household income.
Yes.
And that would be if you were paying every dollar of your income towards your house, which of course you're not.
You're not.
But things like home ownership and a college education and even healthcare are kind of drifting out of reach.
Yes.
And when you survey people and say, what do you care about? What are your priorities? That's generally what they say. Yeah. They say affordability of housing, affordability of healthcare. And when I look at our two parties, I don't see any solutions to those problems.
No, you have a few people that are offering solutions, but nobody's taking them serious.
So what do you think will happen if these affordability costs continue to rise, but we don't do anything about it?
Well, eventually change will happen. People will get upset and they will vote.
Who will they vote for?
They'll vote people out. And it'll happen.
I want to talk about where you get your information, because I know that you and Lynne have a lively dialogue about, is that real? Is that factual?
Yeah.
So where are you getting your news from?
I have a tendency to watch a little bit of everything. CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS. I would say that probably makes up 25%, maybe 20%. I get a lot from Fox News. I get a lot from different internet personalities. I don't follow Tucker Carlson as much as I used to. But, Tucker Carlson, Pool, just a few others. But you always gotta remember, hey, these people, take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
It's like we were talking about, Fox always says they're fair and balanced. Yeah, in their 1 hour news slot.
Okay.
I think that they do a good job in that 6 to 7 o'clock time slot for the news. Other than that, man, they're skewed. Just like CNN, just like MSNBC.
Yep. If you're going to grade the way we talk about politics, what grade do you give us?
I would say we're a D.
A D.
Yeah.
And why'd you give that grade?
A lot of media now is chasing the dollar. So they're telling their people what they want to hear. Not necessarily what they should hear.
So they know that they'll get more viewers if they say...
Yes. They say, this is the demographic we're after. This is what most of that demographic believes. This is what we're going to give them.
And how do you fix that?
Well, I think the internet is probably, as far as putting a check on the big three, the CBS, NBC, ABC, has done a wonderful job. But people just need to be aware that they need to not listen to that soundbite. And they need to listen to the whole thing that was said.
Yep. So for you, the answer is always to trace it back to the source.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But that's always, it's like people's lives are busy. How do you find time to constantly do it?
I'm reading...
I'm retired, so I got time. When I was working 2 jobs or 3 jobs, man, I didn't have time for that.
We talked about this earlier, and I wonder if you can crystallize it for me.
Okay.
What is the American dream?
I think the American dream is to just have the freedom to do what you want to do as long as you're not interfering or hurting other people. If your dream is to join a nudist colony on a beach, have at it. If your dream is to become an Indy race car racer, do it. And it's just no two person's dreams are the same.
Wow. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And if I ask you kind of where are we on that journey? What is America? Owen, what is America?
What is America? I like to think that America is the shining city on the hill. You look at, nobody's really trying to leave this country. There's a lot of people that are trying to get here. And there's a reason for that. And we're very fortunate. The United States had a very unique opportunity. They got to establish their own country. They didn't have to try and restrict a government that was already established. And I thought Barack Obama really stated the Constitution correctly. I think his meaning was off. Well, when he said that the Bill of Rights is a negative Bill of Rights, negative.
A freedom
bill.
From.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And that was the purpose. The purpose of the Bill of Rights was to restrict government from infringing on people's lives. And big government hates it. And I am not a big government person. And I'm a small central government, bigger state government type of person.
Got it. So what's next for you?
Well, my wife and I, we have had a plan. It's kind of got sidetracked, but maybe we'll get it back on together. We bought an RTS bus, the regional transit system, like the big buses that drive around in town.
Why did you buy that bus?
Because we want to renovate it and make it into an RV and travel.
Wow. Where are you going?
Wherever it'll take us.
So you thinking here in the States or go further?
Mostly here in the States. There's so much I want to see that's in this country.
Okay.
I'd love to see some of Canada.
Okay.
You know, Canada's still got a lot of wild open areas. Like I said, I love that.
Owen, thank you very much.
Okay.
This was a great conversation.
All right. Sounds great. Okay.
After the interview, I walked Owen out to his car. And predictably, we had one of the most interesting exchanges of the whole day. Looking back, I wish I'd run inside and grab my microphone. Owen said he'd heard that Trump is considering eliminating the U.S. Department of Education, and he, Owen, would be in favor of that. In his mind, U.S. educational outcomes, specifically in public schools, have been declining since 1980, the year the department was established, while federal spending has only increased. He thinks the department is a failure, and we'd be better off without it. I did some research, and the reality is more nuanced. According to most assessments, educational outcomes in U.S. public schools have improved significantly since the 80s, most conspicuously in math. But the U.S. still ranks near the bottom among first world countries, something that's been true since 1967, the year we started measuring. And then COVID-19 wiped out many of the gains of the last 4 decades. What's interesting is how uneven our progress has been. Public school students in states like Massachusetts, Connecticut, and North Carolina have consistently kept pace with global leaders like South Korea and Finland, whereas states like Illinois, Wisconsin, and Michigan have consistently lagged. The crazy thing is that Florida is actually one of the big success stories of the last 45 years, maybe the biggest one. Although they started out near the bottom, since 2022, Florida's 4th graders have scored 4th in the nation in both reading and math. And that's actually thanks to the hard work of Republicans, specifically Governor Jeb Bush, who worked closely and patiently with the U.S. Department of Education for 20 years. The point is, it's not a simple story. There's the data, there's the news, and then there's how we feel about it. Education is hard, and Owen is not wrong to be frustrated. We've struggled to make headway. But you know what this is making me think is A, I want to talk more with Owen about it, and B, I want to talk to a teacher. I want to see what's going on in the classroom. Okay, question. Thank you so much for introducing me to your friends and helping me make all those wonderful connections. I'm locked in for Detroit in July. Now, I need some cornfields in August. I'm thinking a small town, like a tiny town in Kansas, Nebraska, or Oklahoma. Do you know a small town in the Midwest that's just dying to be podcasted? Maybe somewhere where you could introduce me to someone? If so, hit me up. whatisamericapodcast@gmail.com. Before we get out of here, I want to say thank you to 2 people who helped me out along the way. The first is Stephanie Giles, who introduced me to her dad, Owen. Stephanie, thanks for having a great dad. Thanks also for taking me to $10 burger night at Lucy's in downtown Gainesville. Yum. The second person I want to thank is Nick Slater. Nick is a fellow singer from the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus who introduced me to Stephanie. If you're trying to follow along and stay connected, the best thing you can do is sign up for our newsletter. It's basically my shower thoughts as well as links to the most recent episode of the podcast. If you want to follow me on social, I'm at What is America Podcast on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Finally, if you don't want to see me transform into Florida Man and prefer just to listen, you can find the audio edition of this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and say it with me, wherever you get your podcasts. Next week is another week, and I don't have any idea who I'm going to interview. Nonetheless, I'm confident it will be interesting. Until then, I'll leave you with the Gandhi quote that launched this whole crazy adventure. The act may seem small, but it's important that you do it. Thanks very much for tuning in. I'll see you soon.